Bound by silk, trapped in his gaze, Elian realizes escape isn't just impossible, it's forbidden. Every heartbeat echoes with tension as Rafe's control tightens, and the line between fear and desire blurs. Will he surrender to the man who holds him completely, or fight for freedom that may no longer exist? Subscribe for more dark BL stories, intense slow-burn romance and forbidden love. Like and comment if you dare to step inside this dangerous obsession. The first time Elian Ward saw him, the world seemed to slow down, the bass of the underground club fading until there was only the sound of breath and the shimmer of light off a black silk mask. He shouldn't have been there. He was supposed to be upstairs, serving overpriced cocktails to a sea of influencers and bored millionaires in Soho's most exclusive bar, the Velvet Room. But when the bartender scheduled for the private event called in sick, the manager had barked Elian's name and shoved a tray into his hands. Basement level. No questions. Just keep the glasses full. That was 2 hours ago. Now, sweat clung to the back of his neck as he pushed through a hidden steel door and descended a narrow staircase. The air grew heavier, thicker with anticipation, whispers and the tang of blood masked by cologne. At the bottom waited another world. A concrete room stretched wide beneath the city, illuminated by dim red lights and the gleam of metal railings. Men in tailored suits stood around a caged ring, drinks in hand, their murmurs a low hum beneath the pounding music. Inside the ring, 2 fighters circled each other like predators. Elian froze. This wasn't just an underground club. It was a fight arena. And these weren't ordinary men, they fought for something darker than money. Move, lad. A security guard brushed past him, nearly knocking the tray from his hand. Elian swallowed and forced himself forward, setting drinks on tables with shaking fingers. His eyes couldn't help drifting to the cage again and again. The masked fighter moved like water, fluid, precise, utterly lethal. Every motion was controlled, deliberate. He didn't fight to impress, he fought to end. The crowd's cheers surged when his opponent crumpled to the ground with a strangled gasp. The fighter stood tall, his chest rising and falling steadily beneath a black shirt. He didn't acknowledge the crowd. Didn't even look at them. Something about that composure sent a chill down Elian's spine. A voice near him murmured, "That's Langford. Rafe Langford. Owns this place, owns half of Mayfair. You don't want to cross him." Rafe Langford. Elian had heard the name before, whispered by customers upstairs. The kind of man who existed on the thin line between old money and old crime. The type people both feared and admired. When the match ended, the crowd erupted. Rafe gave a curt nod to the referee and turned toward a side corridor, vanishing behind a velvet curtain. Elian told himself to leave it. Serve the last drinks. Go home. Pretend none of this existed. But curiosity had always been his curse. He hesitated near the corridor, tray empty, and peeked through the curtain. A dim hallway stretched out, lined with mirrors and framed photographs of anonymous faces. At the far end, Rafe stood before a sink, his mask half off, water running over bloodied knuckles. And for a moment, Elian forgot how to breathe. Without the mask, Rafe looked nothing like the monster he'd expected. His face was striking, sharp jawline, storm-gray eyes, the faintest scar across his upper lip. There was an elegance to him that didn't belong in a place like this. Then Rafe looked up, straight into the mirror. Their eyes met through the reflection. Elian's pulse thundered in his ears. He stepped back instinctively, nearly stumbling. But it was too late. Rafe turned slowly, the mask dangling from his fingers. His expression didn't shift. No surprise, no anger, just quiet calculation. "Who let you in here?" His voice was low, steady, the kind of voice that didn't need to rise to command attention. I was told to serve drinks," Elian stammered, backing toward the curtain. The manager said. Rafe took a step forward. "You weren't told to come here." Elian's hands trembled. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "Don't move." The words froze him mid-step. Rafe's boots clicked against the floor as he approached. When he stopped in front of Elian, the scent of leather and smoke clung to him. He wasn't much taller, but somehow he made Elian feel small, seen through, unpeeled. Rafe studied him for a long, unbearable silence. "You're not one of mine." Elian shook his head. "No. I just bartend upstairs." "Name?" "Elian." Rafe repeated it softly, tasting the syllables. "Elian." The way he said it made the name sound like a secret. Rafe leaned in slightly, gaze unreadable. "Do you know what happens to people who see what they shouldn't?" Elian's throat went dry. "You can pretend I didn't. I'll quit. You'll never see me again." Rafe smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That's the problem. I already have seen you. The tension between them was electric, wrong, magnetic. Elian couldn't tell if Rafe wanted to hurt him or simply understand him, and somehow that uncertainty terrified him more. Rafe's fingers brushed a strand of hair from Elian's forehead. His touch was unexpectedly gentle. You have no idea what you've walked into, do you? Elian shook his head. Rafe's eyes softened for just a moment, then hardened again. Go upstairs. Tell no one. If you breathe a word, I'll know. Elian nodded quickly, heart pounding. He turned and nearly ran up the stairs, his breath shallow, his hands clammy. But even as he burst back into the bright barroom and the familiar thrum of music, the image of Rafe's gray eyes stayed with him. That night, in his small flat overlooking a row of brick terraces, Elian couldn't sleep. He told himself it was fear, that he was shaken from seeing violence up close. But beneath that fear was something else. Curiosity. Fascination. The way Rafe had looked at him, as if he'd seen through his every defense. Elian sat at his desk, sketching by the faint light of a lamp. His pencil moved without thought, shaping the line of a jaw, the shadow of a mask, eyes like winter storms. When he looked down, he realized what he'd drawn, Rafe Langford. He tore the page out, crumpled it, and tossed it in the bin. But when he turned off the light and lay in bed, the image burned behind his eyelids. Down in Soho, in a penthouse high above the Thames, Rafe stood at his window, sipping whiskey. He wasn't thinking about the fight. He wasn't thinking about the blood on his hands. He was thinking about a pair of frightened hazel eyes that had dared to look back. A small, knowing smile touched his lips. I told you not to look, he murmured to the night. And yet you did. 3 days passed, and Elian had almost convinced himself it was over. Almost. He'd gone back to his shifts at the bar, blending into the background like always, polite, quiet, forgettable. But sometimes, when the door opened and a chill crept in from the London night, he caught himself glancing up, half expecting to see that same pair of gray eyes watching him from the crowd. They never were. Until they were. It was a Wednesday night when he found the envelope. Slipped beneath the door of his tiny flat in Bloomsbury, thick, black, embossed with a single letter in silver, Al. Inside was a card. You owe me a conversation. Tomorrow. 8 p.m., the Langford Penthouse, Millennium Tower. Don't make me come looking for you. No signature. Just a phone number written in elegant handwriting beneath it. Elian stared at it for a long time. Part of him wanted to tear it up, pretend it had never arrived. The other part, the one that couldn't stop sketching the outline of that masked face, folded the card neatly and placed it on his desk. By the next evening he was standing outside the Millennium Tower. The doorman didn't ask his name. He simply nodded and gestured him toward the private lift. The ride up was silent, the kind of silence that pressed on the chest. As the elevator ascended, Elian caught his reflection in the mirrored wall, pale skin, messy dark hair, eyes that looked a little too wide. He didn't recognize himself. When the doors slid open, a rush of warm air and soft jazz greeted him. The penthouse was vast, all glass, marble, and shadows. The London skyline glittered beyond the windows, the Thames winding darkly below. And there he was, Rafe Langford. He stood near the window, sleeves rolled up, glass of wine in one hand. He turned slightly as Elian entered, the faintest curve of amusement on his lips. I didn't think you'd come, he said. Elian swallowed hard. I almost didn't. Rafe gestured toward the sofa. Then curiosity won. Elian hesitated but sat. The cushions were too soft, the room too still. He could hear his own heartbeat. You're not in trouble, Rafe said after a pause. If that's what you're thinking. Elian's fingers twisted in his lap. Then why am I here? Rafe studied him for a long moment before setting the glass down. Because I can't stop thinking about the look on your face that night. Elian blinked. Fear. Rafe's lips twitched. No, it wasn't fear. It was defiance. You didn't look away. I didn't know who you were, Elian muttered. And now you do. Elian looked up, meeting his eyes. What do you want from me? Rafe stepped closer, slow and deliberate. To understand you. That sounds like something a psychologist would say before they start experimenting on you, Elian said, forcing a weak smile. Rafe chuckled softly. You have a sharp tongue when you're scared. I'm not scared. Then look at me and say that again. Elian did. The air between them thickened. Rafe's eyes, cold, analytical, yet strangely human, held his like a challenge. It wasn't lust, not entirely. It was something else. The pull of two people circling a line neither should cross. After a moment, Rafe turned away and walked to a side table. From a drawer he pulled out a small box wrapped in dark velvet. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Elian frowned. "No." Rafe opened it. Inside lay a thin silk ribbon, black as ink. Elian's pulse jumped. Rafe held it out. "Your hands?" Elian froze. "What?" "I'm not going to hurt you." Rafe's tone softened. "But I want to show you something. This is insane." Rafe stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Trust me, Elian. Just for a moment." It wasn't a command. It was a quiet plea. Elian hesitated, then, slowly, lifted his hands. Rafe took them gently, his fingers cool against Elian's skin. He wound the silk around his wrists, loose enough that he could pull away if he chose to, but firm enough to feel the restraint. Elian's breath came shallow. "What's this supposed to prove?" Rafe stood in front of him, voice low. "That control isn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about surrender." Elian's throat tightened. "You don't even know me." "Maybe I do," Rafe murmured. "You hide behind silence and sketches, pretending you're invisible. But when someone sees you, really sees you, you panic." Elian shook his head, heart hammering. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Rafe reached up, brushing his thumb across Elian's jaw. "You're trembling." Elian tried to pull back, but the ribbon tightened slightly. "Let me go," he whispered. "I will," Rafe said quietly. "But tell me, do you want me to?" The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Elian stared at him, at the calm, unreadable man before him, the faint scar on his lip, the way his gaze softened every time Elian spoke. He hated that part of him, didn't want to leave. Rafe sighed, almost as if disappointed in himself, and untied the ribbon. "You can go," he said simply. Elian rubbed his wrists, unable to meet his eyes. "Was this another game to you?" Rafe's voice was barely above a whisper. "No. Just a reminder. You're not invisible, Elian. Someone's always watching." That sent a chill down his spine. "That's not comforting. It's not meant to be." Elian stood unsteady. "I should go." Rafe nodded. "You know the way." As Elian turned toward the lift, Rafe added softly, "Next time bring your sketchbook." Elian paused. "Why?" Rafe's expression was unreadable. "Because I want to see what you see when you look at me." The lift doors closed between them, sealing the silence. On the ride down, Elian pressed his hands against the mirrored wall, staring at the faint red marks on his wrists. They shouldn't have made his heart race, but they did. He wasn't sure whether Rafe was trying to break him apart or teach him something about himself. And that uncertainty terrified him more than anything. That night, when Elian finally fell asleep, the dream came, of silk around his wrists, gray eyes in the dark, and a voice whispering in his ear. "You fight too much for someone who wants to be caught." It rained the next time Elian saw him. London rain, relentless, cold, and personal. It slid down the glass walls of the gallery where Elian's student exhibition had just opened, blurring the reflections of the small crowd moving between canvases and whispered critiques. It was supposed to be his night. His first real showing. He'd told himself that. Repeated it like a mantra as he adjusted his black shirt and stared at the oil painting that had already drawn murmurs, the one he'd nearly hidden. The one of him. He'd painted Rafe from memory, the eyes, the sharp lines of his face, the strange calm that unsettled everything around him. But in the painting, Rafe wasn't wearing a mask. He was looking at something beyond the frame, something you couldn't see. Elian had titled it Unseen. He'd told himself no one would notice, that no one would recognize. But when he turned from the wine table, Rafe Langford was standing in front of it. For a second, Elian thought he was imagining him. The black coat, the rain-slicked hair, the calm focus that froze every sound around him. Rafe didn't belong among paint and chatter. He looked like he'd stepped out of the canvas itself. Elian's heart kicked. How did you?" "Your lecturer posted about the show," Rafe said, voice low. "I was curious." He stepped closer to the painting, eyes tracing the strokes. "You remembered the scar." Elian swallowed. "It's hard to forget." Rafe glanced at him, expression unreadable. "So this is how you see me." "I didn't," Elian hesitated. "I didn't think you'd actually come." Rafe's gaze lingered on him for a moment before drifting back to the painting. "You made me look human." "You are." Rafe's mouth curved, not a smile exactly. "You think so?" "I don't paint monsters." Rafe's eyes softened, then darkened. "Then you haven't looked closely enough." Before Elian could respond, Rafe slipped a card into his pocket. "Come to the penthouse tomorrow. Midnight. There's something I want to show you." And just like that he was gone. The next night, Elian told himself he wouldn't go. He paced his flat, watching the clock tick toward 12, telling himself it was madness, dangerous even. Then he grabbed his sketchbook and left anyway. The city was quiet by the time he reached Millennium Tower. The doorman didn't stop him. The elevator knew where to go. The penthouse was dark when he stepped inside, the city lights outside casting faint gold patterns across the floor. "Rafe," he called. A faint hum came from deeper within. He followed it, past the living room, past the grand piano, until he found an open door. Inside was a room he'd never seen before, wide, filled with canvases, the air smelling faintly of turpentine and rain. An art studio. And every canvas was of him. Dozens of them, Elian's face in charcoal, in oil, in shadow. Some half-finished, some eerily lifelike. He froze. What the hell? Rafe stood in the corner, hands in his pockets, watching him. "I started painting you before we met." Elian turned slowly. "That's impossible." Rafe's gaze didn't waver. "I saw you once sketching by the river. You drew like you were drowning and the pencil was the only thing keeping you alive." Elian's breath hitched. "You followed me?" Rafe's tone was calm, almost clinical. "I watched you. That's not better. I wasn't stalking you, Elian. I was studying you. There's a difference." Elian laughed sharply. "No, there isn't." Rafe took a step closer. "You're angry. Good. That means you care." "Care?" Elian snapped. "You tied me up, you watch me, you paint me like I'm some experiment." "You are," Rafe said quietly. "You're the first person who ever looked at me without flinching. You don't know how rare that is." Elian's pulse thudded. "You don't know what you're doing." "Don't I?" Rafe moved closer until they were inches apart. "You paint because you can't say what you feel. I tie things down because I can't control what I feel. We're not so different." Elian's jaw clenched. "You think that makes any of this okay?" Rafe exhaled, gaze flickering between Elian's eyes and mouth. "No. But it makes it inevitable." He reached out, slow enough for Elian to stop him, and brushed a thumb across Elian's cheek. The touch was light, trembling with something unspoken. Elian didn't move. For a moment the world narrowed to breath and pulse. "Why me?" Elian whispered. Rafe's voice was barely a murmur. "Because you look at me like I still have a soul." The words hit too close. Elian stepped back, heart racing. "You can't keep doing this. You can't control people just because you're lonely." Rafe flinched, the first crack in his composure. "You think this is about control? You don't even see it, do you? You're afraid of being powerless, so you cage everyone who gets close." Rafe's jaw tightened. "And you're afraid of being seen, so you run." Their eyes locked, anger and hurt and something dangerously close to longing flickering between them. Rafe turned away first. "Then go," he said quietly. "If that's what you want." Elian hesitated at the doorway. "I don't know what I want anymore." "Then figure it out," Rafe said, voice tight. "Before I stop trying to let you." Elian left. Outside, the rain hit harder, the cold biting through his coat. He walked fast, almost running, but his reflection followed him in every shop window, haunted, conflicted. By the time he reached his flat, his hands were shaking too much to hold the keys. He dropped them, pressed his forehead against the door, and let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. What terrified him most wasn't that Rafe had painted him. It was that in every single painting he looked alive. As if Rafe had captured something Elian had been trying to find in himself for years. He spent the rest of the night sketching furiously, tearing through page after page. The lines grew messier darker until one drawing stopped him cold. A figure standing behind another, hands hovering near his throat, not choking, not restraining, just there. He stared at it, heart pounding. The caption scrawled beneath in his own handwriting read, "He doesn't own me. He sees me." Elian stared at those words until dawn bled gray over the city. He didn't know whether to be terrified or grateful. The city felt quieter the week after Elian left Rafe's penthouse. Quieter in that uneasy way silence takes hold when something important has been broken. He didn't paint. He didn't sleep much either. The rain against his windows became a rhythm he couldn't shut out, reminding him of Rafe's voice, Rafe's touch, Rafe's stillness. He told himself he was done. That whatever existed between them had burned itself out. But lies told often enough start to sound like truth. He saw Rafe again on the news, a flash of his name in bold letters across the television at the bar. Langford Empire under investigation. The story ran for 30 seconds. Allegations of illegal gambling, unlicensed fight events, missing funds. No arrests yet. Just shadows tightening around a man who'd built an empire on control. Elian muted the TV, but the words echoed anyway. By the third night, he was standing on Waterloo Bridge in the rain, sketchbook under his arm, heart pounding in his throat. He told himself he wasn't going there, that he was just walking. But his feet kept moving toward Millennium Tower. The penthouse was half dark when he arrived, guards gone, lights low, the world outside reflected in the glass. Rafe stood by the window again, shirt sleeves rolled, tie discarded. He didn't turn when Elian entered. "I wondered how long it would take," he said quietly. Elian stepped forward. "You knew I'd come back." "I hoped you would," Rafe said, still facing the skyline. "Though I wasn't sure if it would be to see me, or to watch me fall." Elian hesitated. "I saw the news." Rafe exhaled, slow and deliberate. "The walls always collapse eventually. I built mine too high." He finally turned. His face looked different, drawn, tired, human. The mask he'd worn so perfectly before was gone. Elian's voice softened. "Why did you start it? The fights, the club?" Rafe's gaze drifted past him as if looking into a memory. "My father used to say that power makes you untouchable." He was wrong. "It makes you lonely." Elian frowned. "When he died, I inherited everything. The money, the businesses, the debts, the enemies. I tried to control the chaos by creating my own version of it." Rafe's mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "The club was order, rules. People knew what to expect when they stepped inside." "And me?" Elian asked. Rafe's eyes flicked to him. "You were the first thing I couldn't predict." Silence stretched between them, fragile and heavy. Elian looked down at his sketchbook. "You painted me because you couldn't control me." "I painted you," Rafe said, "because you made me remember what it felt like to want to be seen." Something broke quietly in Elian's chest. He took a few steps forward. "You don't need to tie people to keep them close, Rafe. You just need to stop hiding." Rafe's laugh was soft, humorless. "And you don't need to run every time someone tries to touch what's real." Elian met his gaze, unflinching. "Maybe we both needed to be caught first." They stood there for a long time, two people who had spent their lives pretending not to need anyone. Finally Rafe said, "You should go. The investigation will get worse. They'll drag everyone connected to me through it. You don't deserve that." "I'm not here because I want to be safe," Elian said quietly. "I'm here because I couldn't stop thinking about you." Rafe's control slipped, just for a heartbeat. His breath caught, eyes glimmering with something he didn't have words for. He stepped closer. "You shouldn't." "I know." "Then why?" Elian's fingers brushed his cheek. "Because you showed me who I was when I stopped pretending." Rafe closed his eyes, leaning into the touch. "And who's that?" "Someone who chooses." When he opened his eyes again, Rafe looked undone. No mask, no walls, no command in his voice. Just a man who had finally run out of ways to hide. He took Elian's hand gently. "You don't belong to me." Elian smiled faintly. "I know." Rafe's thumb brushed over the faint marks on Elian's wrist, the ghost of silk that had once bound him. "I shouldn't have touched you like that." "You didn't hurt me," Elian said. "You just made me look." They stood there, the storm reflected in the glass around them, the city below blurred by rain. For the first time, Rafe didn't try to hold on. He just breathed, quietly, deeply, as if learning how to do it for the first time. "Stay tonight," he said finally. "Not as someone I need to control. Just stay." Elian hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Okay." They didn't touch again that night. They didn't need to. Elian sat by the window sketching while Rafe watched the river, both men silently letting the rain wash over the past. When morning came, the first light fell across the floor, soft, gray, forgiving. Rafe turned, his voice rough. "What are you drawing?" Elian handed him the page. It wasn't a portrait this time, not of Rafe, not of himself. Just two figures standing beside each other, untied, their reflections stretching into the water. Rafe studied it for a long time. "What's it called?" Elian smiled faintly. "Belonging." Rafe set the drawing on the table, his hand lingering on the edge. "You could still walk away." "I could," Elian said. "But this time, I'd be doing it for the right reason." Rafe met his eyes. "Which is?" "To come back on my own terms." Rafe's expression softened, a flicker of something like peace crossing his features. Outside, the city began to stir. Traffic hums, footsteps, the faint sound of life returning to motion. Inside, the air finally felt still. Rafe poured 2 cups of coffee and joined Elian at the window. They didn't speak for a long time. It wasn't silence, not anymore. It was understanding. When Elian finally stood to leave, Rafe didn't stop him. He simply said, "If you ever paint me again, make sure it's the real version this time." Elian smiled. "I already have." And when the elevator doors closed behind him, there was no fear this time, just the quiet certainty that some connections didn't have to be owned to mean something. They simply had to be chosen.